Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Keller. I am a twice published designer of board games, focusing mainly on economic Euro games. I'm also the designer of a couple dozen failed designs that will never see the light of day. And just so I can get a sense of the room, is anyone here currently trying to design a game? Great. Has anyone here been published? No. Okay. So there are three things we're going to talk about today. Most important are the two parallel cycles of game development. Second is the personal growth that you'll have to go through in order to effectively execute these cycles. And lastly, we'll talk a little bit about the personal tool set that I use in my process. So first, the two parallel cycles of board game design. Board game design can be broken down into your game and then everything else. Now, it might seem like your game is the most important thing to focus on when you're developing a board game. But really, if you haven't done this successfully before, the everything but your game is the more important part, and that's what we're gonna start with. So the first thing is to play. You would not expect to read a good book from an author who has never read a book in their life. Likewise, if you want to be an effective game designer, you need to understand what other people have done in the space, so you can learn from them, you can improve on them, and you can see your own weak points. It's not just about pulling ideas from other people, but it can open up new ways of thinking about how to approach things that can send you off on your own original tangents. This is Rainer Knizia. I'm not sure I pronounced that right. One of the most prolific and award-winning game designers, and in an interview he gave to the Game Designer's Guidebook, which I'll mention that book. It's a nice, interesting read. It gives you some good, interesting stories. It's not really a guide for how to do it yourself, because a lot of the stories barrel down to just dumb luck, being in the right place at the right time. But it is interesting to see the different paths that other game designers have gone through in order to understand, there's no one way to do this. But, Rainer Knizia, I'll read the full quote. Designing games is a long learning process. You need to get experience by playing lots of different games, talking to people who make and play games, and studying the product lines of companies. I've done games for 35 years, and I'm still learning all the time. I still understand very little about what makes a game successful. So this is something you need to expect. There is, however sure you are about your ideas of how a game should work, you're probably wrong. Just because there's tens of thousands of people out there trying different things, and someone else has probably come up with something better already. So the next step is to network. You're coming here to a convention. This is good. You're meeting people. When you come to conventions, if there are publishers at conventions, you want to network them. And actually, let's talk about, there are different kinds of networking within this industry. So first is local. So go to your friendly local gaming store. Just play games there. They have an open game night. I know the guy who runs this convention, he has a game store that's not far from here.
20-30 minutes.
Right. I myself, I live in Stamford right now. There's a game store about 20 minutes from me that has a weekly game night. Go to local game nights. Meet new people. They will introduce you to new games that you won't even have to pay for, because they already bought them. And so you get experience for free, and you start building out your network. And those people, even if people who aren't in the industry, they're going to come in handy when you need play testers for your game that aren't your immediate family or roommate. So local networking is where you start. Next, forums. So Board Game Geek, Board Game Designers Forum. These are places that have what are known as alphas who set these are people who set the trends and hype up the news for new game releases. So You want to be there. You want to be observing. What are they talking about? What are they getting excited about? Right now, Board Game Geek is dominated by, if you look on its hotness list, of all things, Monopoly Gamer, which is insane because Board Game Geek is generally people who despise Monopoly, but Monopoly Gamer is the number one thing they're talking about right now, and you need to know about that. Next, conventions, you're all here. That's fantastic. While you're here, there's a tabletop room. Go play games with people. There are going to be people who set up a game looking for players. Go play and meet with them. There are, I'm running my own sessions of games. There are other designers running sessions of the games. Go play with them, meet them, talk to them. Ask them questions. Find out how they approach things. And last, all of these things should then feed into social media. All these people you meet in your friendly local gaming store, on these forums, at conventions, get their social media contact information. I myself, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+. I don't and two of those I don't even really like. I dislike them. But I'm on them and I'm active on them because there are people who are on each of those platforms that aren't on the others. And I want to make sure my net is as wide as possible. So when it comes time for me to talk about a new release of mine, it's reaching the maximum audience possible. And you should make sure your first post is never about your own game. You have to do it now. You have to start on this years before you start shopping your game. Because and I see this all the time, people whose Twitter account is the name of their game. Like they'll follow me and message me, and it's like, dude, I have no idea who you are. You're just trying to sell me something. I don't care. I block. Done. You have to establish a presence now. So people know you. So when it comes time to blast out, your Kickstarter, which I know half of you are thinking about, you have people who are already receptive to your message. They're not complete strangers. Test for others. So there are other designers out there. This is one of the absolute most important things you can do, right? That has nothing to do with your game and has to do with other people's games. Testing for others does several things. First, it builds up capital. It helps you build up capital with them, right? So when it comes time, you need testers for your game. They're going to be experienced people who know what they're doing that are willing to test your game because you tested for them. Second, you're going to learn from their mistakes, right? As much as you learn from playing published games, you learn 10 times as much from playing a terrible game because let other people make the mistakes for you. And also, when you're testing for others, it helps you be detached from the process. You no longer have a personal investment on, is this a good game, right? So it sharpens your thinking. It helps you spot problems when you're testing your own game, and I still do this. It's just you dismiss problems. You assume certain things should work the way they work. Testing someone else's game will help you learn to test your own game better. This is Prime Time. This was called Prime Time. This is a game by Gil Hova. I met him at through the New York City Game Designers Forum, and they have weekly play tests. And while I was living in New York, I tested with them, right? And I saw over years of development how this, and eventually this release, and this became the networks. And Gil launched his he launched his own publishing company, which is now successful with this. He's releasing expansion. He released Wordsy, right? So you get to see other game designers' arcs and follow them, right? And now it's powerful to be able to test other designers' games. Write about your experience designing games. Every time you do something, start a blog, write a short blog post, or just write a post to social media every time. I think a blog is good because it centralizes your content. If you post only to social media, your posts disappear into the ether after 5 hours, and they're gone forever. But start a blog, start writing about it. For 10 years, I had a blog, GameDesignerWannabe.com, that I eventually stopped once I became published. But some things that did for me, by writing, it forces you to crystallize your thoughts about what you've been doing, what the results have been, what other people have, and just religiously, no matter how boring the post is, just a list of, here are the scores, and here are the notable things that happened during the game. That's a post. Will anyone read it? Probably not. But you're forcing yourself to commit to publicly showing your progress so that you have it there. Nice benefit of it, people will eventually stumble on it. The one day Seth Jaffe, who worked for Tasty Minstrel, stumbled on my blog, read about the games that I was doing, which really were years away from being ready, but he was interested in what I was doing. I made a contact, and he helped me develop, and eventually Tasty Minstrel published one of my games. So writing is important. It sharpens you and it gets you out there. So there's one of my dumb blogs talking about I went to BGGCon. Here's what happened on the first day. Just force yourself to write about it. Okay, let's move on to your game. So this is a much more complicated cycle, but it all starts with deciding what you're going to make. And most people, they just have an idea for a game. It's like, okay, let's do that, and then that's fine. But once you're ready to buckle down, you don't want to just use the very first idea that comes into your head. You want to think about what kind of game you want to design, what kind of themes, what kind of mechanics. And this is where, in that other cycle, playing comes in really handy, because you've seen so much. You've seen what other people are going to do. You're not going to duplicate their work. But also, not just that, not just deciding on a unique space for yourself, but you also want to decide to do something that you can keep up with. I'm not sure who this gentleman is, but he said you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. If you don't, any rational person would give up. Game design is a years-long process, even for the simplest games that you think, it'll be quick to bang this out. It's more the things you'll learn as you develop even the simplest game. We'll just stretch it on. And even the day your game releases and is in print, you'll have an idea, why didn't I do this instead? It's never ending. So you want to make sure you decide, the game you decide on is one you can sustain yourself through even when test after test is just going bad. You don't know how to fix this problem, and you want to give up, and you just ignore it, you set it aside for 3 months, and you make no progress. So deciding on a game you can keep up with is important. Research. So you want to, like I said, you want to make sure you're not just copying what someone else has done. After you've decided on a game, Board Game Geek is a great resource for researching, because there's so many games that are released every month that it's impossible to keep up with. Think about what kind of themes your gamer is exploring, what kind of mechanics. Use Board Game Geek as a resource to research what other people are doing there. You may not be able to play all these games, but it'll give you an idea of you can read what people are writing about it. You can watch reviews. You can make sure what you're doing is unique. Now, many years ago, I went to Gen Con, and I had an appointment with a publisher. And I met him at his booth, but he was, someone else had come up to talk to him first, and that's fine. Never be pushy at a convention. You're begging for their time. Be gracious. Be prepared to wait for them. But he had, a designer he had never spoken to had just, walked up to him. It's always better to make an appointment, but okay, this guy had walked up to him and, was talking about his game, and he was talking about, it's where players, you're all going into a mine, and cards are being randomly drawn, and treasure is being added to the loot. At any point, you can choose to just quit and leave with the treasure you have already. But everyone else who keeps going, they might get more treasure, but they might fall in. They might hit a trap or something and lose everything. It's a push your luck game. And as the designer's talking about this, I'm thinking, wow, this is really familiar. This sounds like Diamant. And that is exactly what the publisher then said to this guy. I didn't say anything. You never want to talk bad about someone else's design. But the publisher me said, yeah, I hear what you're saying. This sounds exactly like Diamant. Have you played that? And the guy said, no, but let me tell you about what makes my game special. And this guy had burned this bridge forever, right there, by not only not having done his homework, but refusing to listen to what the publisher said of, dude, you have to tell me how this is different from this game. And he had never played it, so he couldn't answer it, but he just pushed ahead, and he had burned that bridge. And that's why research is so important. This is a homemade version of DMUP, by the way. But yeah, so it's research. Even once you're sure this is something you want to do, make sure no one else has done it before. Okay, so next, you've done your research, you have your idea. It's time to make mechanic POC, proof of concept. Don't try to design the whole game at once, right? Generally, especially me, I tend to go bottom. If anyone's familiar with Mark Rosewater, who talks about top-down versus bottom-up design. Top-down means you start with a theme and you find mechanics that fit it. Bottom-up is you start with mechanics and then later on find a theme that fits your mechanics. But either way, once you have, like, even if you go top-down, there's probably a core mechanic you're immediately choosing. And you want to build out that POC as quickly as possible with as few pieces as possible to just try out that mechanic. That's going to be at the heart of your game. To find out, does it work? Is it fun? Is it interesting? Don't worry about layering on, 50 different types of cards. Just do a few cards that all follow the same mechanics and see if that core concept is workable. So you want to start with your mechanic POC. This was the very first POC I did. It was a sheet of cardboard with 4 different goods on it, some glass beads, money I stole from a choir, and some dice. And I tested. I had some friends who were generous enough at this time to God bless them for giving me their time. It was terrible, and I learned that out in like 10 minutes of playing it with them, right? And it's good that I didn't first spend 20 hours coming up with a massively more complex set of goods and event cards and all that, because the core mechanic was uninteresting, and so I found that out quickly, and that's what you want to do. Philip DeBerry, who's done games like Revolution, he had an idea, and he had an idea for a new game, and very next day he had this prototype going and was testing it. He was able to turn around his mechanic POC in one day. And this is great because it meant he was immediately learning. And follow him. He's a great guy. He said, I want to do something else with the mechanic from Revolution and thought about filling rockets bound for planets. I wanted more planets, but only needed 4 to 5 to play. Basic ideas all around, plus I could use the Revolution bits for some of it. Right? Make it cheap, make it quick, test right away. And this gets us to trash. You have to be ready to trash your designs early and often. Here's a partial list of the designs that I've done. 2 of these have gotten into print, and even the ones I'm currently working on aren't even in here. So for every one I get published, I make 10 in various stages of prototype that I immediately throw away. You have to be willing to give up on your great idea, otherwise you're going to waste time on it's not actually a great idea. It's a numbers game. You got to keep trying and trying, and things can come back around. That game I show you, this. So, this I completely trashed, but it gave me idea. The idea behind this game was about thinking about supply and demand and how markets clear and how they work. And eventually, 10 years later, completely different game of mine, Captains of Industry, got published based on what I learned from trying this and then throwing it away. So you got to be willing to move on. And even if you set something aside, you decide to trash it, you can always come back to it. Just keep trying different things. You'll learn more. Gil Hova, who I talked about, the Formal Ferret Games guy, he had this mechanic that he loved, an auction mechanic with a sliding tile, and you could bid higher and it slides the tile, and it doesn't matter, but it was a unique auction mechanic, and he built a game around it, and it didn't work, so he built another game around it, and it didn't work, and he built another, and he kept trying this mechanic in different games, and to this day, no game exists with that mechanic. But the third game he tried to build with this mechanic is now public, like that's what he started the networks with. And he now has his own company without that mechanic, but because he was trying different things, trying to get this one thing to work and willing to throw away bad ideas, he got it into print. So be willing to trash your bad ideas. Okay, build. So you have in your mechanic POC the first playtest. Obviously, it's not great, but it shows interesting. The core mechanic is interesting. There's something there you can build on, and that's what building is. Building isn't the first prototype. Building is recognizing you have your core mechanic, and you need to build a game around it, right? You can't have a single mechanic game because everyone's done every mechanic already, so there's no space there. You need to find a way to put that core mechanic inside a larger context and build it up. So this is from these are cards from my game City Hall, which is published now, so these are some of the early cards from one of my first designs. And you want to see what the amazing board looks like? That was the board for the game for a couple months. That was the board for the game, and eventually I built it up. Right? I start with just a plain white thing so I can test out the mechanics, and then I build on top of it. I give it theme, I give it layers, I add other mechanics. I add these tracks that do other things, parks, bridges. You add mechanics, you build up your successful POC. And once you built it up a bit, now you test. Now something to keep in mind here, there's always an off-ramp back to trash. Every time you test, you have to be willing at the end of that test to decide whether or not, nope, all this work, I've worked on this for months and months and months, for years, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up on it. No, you're throwing good time after bad. Time is your most valuable asset as a game designer. So after every test, you have to be willing to throw it away. But let's talk about what you do during a test. So there are 3 questions you need to answer before you start a test. At the start of every test, who are you testing with? Is it your friends? Are they strangers? Are they people who have played different versions of previous versions of this game? You need to understand who is testing and what they know and what their background is in order to be able to understand the results. And one of the biggest problems that novice designers come into, and it's not really their fault, is that they use the same testers over and over. And when you use the same testers over and over, they bring their knowledge of past tests with them. There's no diversity of thought. You get groupthink. People get into patterns. So you have to be extremely aware of who is testing your game. Next is what? Well, what's what? Your game, right? There is no your game until it's in print. You have to know exactly what you need to adopt. You need to adopt a very strict versioning procedure for your game so that you know every test, what are the changes for this test. I come from a software background. I'm a product manager for a software team. And every build has a change log, no matter what, so that we know exactly what's different in this log. We know what we're testing. We know what we're looking for. And why. That's what you're looking for, right? Don't ever test a game thinking, well, let's just play it and see what happens. This is a waste of your time. This is and worse, it's a waste of your tester's time. You need to know exactly what you're looking for and make sure the game tests that, and cut off the playtest as soon as you find out the answer to that. If you're finding out, what's gonna, if this event that happens in round 3 destroys the game, well, you should know that whether or not it destroyed the game by round 5. You don't need to go to round 20 just because. And make sure your testers are aware of that. They have to be willing to understand that you can cut off the game at any point. And maybe you cut it off, you talk about it, and then you restart and see what the difference. But before you restart, write down what you're changing for this one. It's critical because if you don't know what it is, you can't answer why you're testing the next one. So after testing, you're going to do really one of 2 things. You're going to complicate the game, or you're going to simplify it. Now, if there are people say, well, what if you're just tweaking? You're neither complicating nor simplifying. Well, at really most stages in the process, if you think your game only needs tweaking, you're wrong, right? If the game isn't grabbing people, if they're not begging to play it again immediately, then your game is missing something or it has too much of something. You need to complicate or you need to simplify. It is going to be a long, long time before you should be thinking about small, trivial changes. You need to take big steps because you need to close the distance between yourself and the end goal. And you don't know where the end zone is. It could be in any direction. It could be under the ground for all you know, but you need to move quickly to get there, or at least quickly to know that you're going the wrong way. The worst thing you can do is take small incremental steps for months and then discover all of those were a waste. It was the completely wrong direction to go. So complicating, the first thing you can do, this is what you're going to do more often when you're starting out, when your game is in its early design stage, is that you have your mechanic PLC, you want to build stuff up on it. You want to add things that are interesting. You want to add surprises and twists on top of your core mechanic. So you're complicating it. The other thing is simplifying. Simplifying will generally happen later on towards the end when you realize, okay, we got this great thing. People are excited about this stuff. What's holding it back from being a great game? There's probably mechanics that you that have been around since the start of the game, and they've been around so long that neither you nor none of your testers realize that it's completely unnecessary because you've come to identify that as a core part of the game. And what you need to, and this is one of the reasons when you're doing the who for your tests, you want new people over time, right? If your game is in its 8th month of development, you should be getting people who have never played it before, because you need fresh eyes so you know what you can throw away from this game that's going so well. Towards the end of game development, you're going to want to start doing blind testing. This is going to be the hardest thing to do for a new designer, because you're not going to have a network of people who are willing to do this for you. I mean, who here is willing to take a prototype from a designer from someone you've never heard of, get 3 of your friends together, and spend 2 hours on something that could be terrible? Right? Any hands? Okay, I'm adding you to my list. Good job. So getting blind testers is the hardest thing, and there's not really a good answer here. You can try, again, in the Board Game Designers Forum, because there you have game designers who are willing to support each other. If you're going to local board game designer groups like the New York City Game Designers Group, if there are people in that group who haven't played your game before, one day you can say, okay, you 4 haven't played my game. I'm not going to run this test. Here's a rule book. Here are the pieces. Let me know how it goes. And so blind testing is just that. You are blind to what happens during the test. You know nothing except what happens at the end. Now, you can watch a blind test, but most designers, when they're watching a blind test, can't help but say, no, that's not what the rule means. You're doing it wrong. No, you need to put it over here, and you need to pay up front. But for a blind test to actually be useful, you have to divorce yourself from the process and let the players figure it out for themselves, and make sure none of them have ever played a previous version of the game. Another reason blind tests are so hard to arrange, because you only get to have someone do a blind test once. If they've done a blind test before, it's worthless. Blind testing is also something to point out here. By this point, if you've been testing and you've been doing your what correctly and you have your changelog, you should have a rule book, right? You should have a rule book early on, and then your changelog on how you make changes to that rule book, because it's hardest to write a rule book at the end. Build up the rule book as you build your game. This is the least fun part of game design, is writing the rules down and rewriting them and rewording them in a way that, and creating diagrams that people can understand. But you have to do it. It's a core skill, because at a certain point, you're going to need to shop your game around. Now, some publishers out there will let you arrange a meeting with them where you demo your game to them. They spend maybe 15 minutes. They won't play the whole game. They'll play it for 15 minutes before they make a decision to throw you out of the room. And but some publishers will let you give that 15-minute demo. Most publishers will not. You will never see them. It will be a blind test. You will put your game in a box, ship it to them, and even the person who agreed to test your game, the publisher himself, isn't going to be the one testing it. He's going to have people who have never talked to you, who know nothing about your game. They didn't hear your elevator pitch. They don't know what makes it interesting. He's going to hand them the box and say, tell me what happens. what happens, and then they tell him, and then he tells you, and you get like twice divorced feedback. So if you don't have, if you haven't been spending these years putting together a rock solid rule book with extremely precise examples, you're wasting the publisher's time, and guess what? If your design is that bad, they're never going to take another box from you. You've burnt that bridge forever because you wasted their time because you weren't ready. Okay, let's talk about personal growth. So you're going to have to change. The way you think about things, the way you approach things is going to change as you learn how to develop a board game. And the biggest part of this, let's go to example from, so like I said, I'm a product manager, and in my day job, we have this product cycle. So I come up with a vision for the product. I give that vision in terms of functional requirements to my development team. Development team creates a build for QA. QA either gives me feedback, at which point I have to think what to do with that feedback and instruct the developers how to deal with that feedback, or they accept the build. Sorry, that should not say QA there. That should say release management. They deliver to release management. Release management gives it to the customers, and the customers, it starts anew, right? So there's this nice cycle, and I occupy this little corner here. And this is great because I'm taking feedback from the customers and figuring out a way to communicate that to the dev team, right? It's my product, but I'm not the one coding it. If there's a bug, I'm not responsible for it. Whatever, no, fix it. I'm not going to argue with the customer about the bug. I'm going to say, fix it, guys. They want it fixed, you fix it. The problem is when we try to turn this into game development. Now, the problem here, so we still have customers. Now we have a publisher instead of release team. We have playtesters instead of QA. But the big problem here is I now occupy two roles. I am the product manager and I am the development team. And here's the problem, is that now when I get feedback from playtesters, or I see what people want, I now have a vested stake in how that game is built. And it feels bad. And I disagree. I don't think it should work the way the customer thinks it should. And this is where the cycle breaks down. Because I'm occupying a dual role, I become too invested in the product. I can't step back and see it from clear eyes, right? And even if you think you can, even if you think you will listen to all feedback and you'll always take it into account, I've seen game designers who are great game designers fall into this trap, who argue with their playtesters or just zone out. You can see it. You're doing a playtest session with them, and their eyes zone out because they're not thinking about what you're saying because they don't care because they think you're wrong. And you can't do this. You have to learn to occupy two personalities. When you're listening to your playtesters or the customers, you have to not be the guy who made the game. You have to be the guy who's going to tell the guy who made the game what he did wrong. So this is something you're going to have to learn. Sorry, I need a drink. Now, yeah, okay. I think that's it. So, how much time do we have? Okay. So I'm going to quickly run through my current tool set. This is the least important part of it. You're going to develop your own tool set. These are some things that have helped me. I found work for my process, but over time, you're going to need to figure out your own. First thing, notebook and pen. I like this notebook. I have no idea how to pronounce it, but I like it because it fits in my jeans pocket, has a soft cover, so I can always have it on me. Actually, it's in my bag right now. But you want something you can always have on you and doesn't bother you to carry it around, so that when you get feedback or when you get an idea, you can immediately write it down. And you have to make this a habit. Oh, that reminds me, thank you, notebook, for reminding me part of the skill for personal growth in helping you divorce things is when you're getting feedback from your playtesters, no matter what they're saying, write it down. No matter how wrong they are, no matter how many people at the table have said the same thing, Record also that this is the fourth person who said this. You have to make it a habit to transcribe every little bit of feedback that you get from playtesters. It has to be a habit, because if you start making judgment calls about what feedback to write down and what not to, you're going to develop that blind spot, and your game is going to suffer. So thank you, Notebook, for reminding me of that. Next, Sharpies, because you're going to remember at the last minute you forgot to make a change to the game, so always have colored Sharpies with you. Printer. I'm sure most of you have a printer. I recommend, if you can afford it, color laser for a couple reasons. First, you're going to be printing so many, especially if you have a card-based game or something like that, you're going to be printing so many copies of your cards, you will save money with a color laser over an inkjet. That ink will ruin you. Also, nice thing, when you're printing out full-page graphics, ink will destroy the paper. Laser will not. Your paper will stay nice and crisp. This is something I recently added to my set. There's Kickstarter for this. They now sell this separately. This game bag, and the reason I like this one, it's a normal game bag with nice squared size, which is what you always want. But I like this. This one comes with these essentially prototype boxes, right? So you're not scrounging for boxes. It comes with all these little packets and sleeves, and lets you hold all different kinds of pieces. So this is great for carrying your prototype around at conventions. Paint.net. This is the first graphics program I used, mainly because it's free. It's completely free. It's better than just MS Paint because it has layers, so you can do layering, and as you're building your prototype. Part of building your prototype is you want to start making it look a little bit nicer, right? Don't spend too much time on it, but a little bit of effort goes a long way towards helping your playtesters immerse and engage with your game. So Paint.net. There are other things you can use, but this one I found is super simple to learn, and it's free, and it has layers, which is important. Eventually, though, once I got more serious about this, I had to learn Adobe Creative Cloud. This is good to learn. Illustrator is better to learn than Photoshop, mainly because Illustrator keeps everything in vectors, and vector-based is better. V for better. InDesign, also good. InDesign, the reason I use InDesign, it's mostly publishers will use InDesign when they create print-ready files, so you'll need to be able to open those to proof them. But also with InDesign, there's this great game designer named Daniel Solis. He has a series called Card at Work, and one of the best things on there is a video about how to use data merge in InDesign, so that when you're making that deck of 50 cards, you don't make 50 cards, you make one card, a spreadsheet, and InDesign creates the 50 cards for you from that. So, this is a good skill to learn. If you're still in school, Creative Cloud, yes, it's expensive, but it's a lifelong skill that it's worth the investment long term. And if you're in school, you can get it at a discounted rate. And then watch his videos. Card at Work helps a lot. For prototyping, there are some parts you can't print out of a printer. They're too big for a printer, or they're wood, or custom hex cutouts or something like that. There are different sources for this. I use mainly, for custom printing, the two main ones I hear people use are the Game Crafter and Drive-Thru Cards. I prefer the Game Crafter because I don't just use them for cards. They have lots of different parts. They have boards and cutouts, and I prefer keeping it all in one place, so I mainly use the Game Crafter. Meeple Source is where I get the wood bits, a lot of wood bits that I need. They have lots of variations, and I'll just watch them, and occasionally they'll come out with a new piece. I don't even have a game for it yet, but I'll just get some because it's unique. It's like maybe I'll need a game I'll need that for a game someday. OneNote. So OneNote is my note-taking tool of choice when I'm conducting a playtest. Yes, I have the notebook, and I always keep it with me to write down feedback. But sometimes when you're writing out tables, in this test here, I was writing down every action everyone took because this was pretty near the end, and I wanted to start doing metrics, start writing metrics against what actions were taken, how often, so I could understand it understand the game on a numerical level. Nice thing about OneNote, it's bigger. You don't have to worry about having a tiny notebook in your pocket. So there are other programs that can do that as well. Mischief, fantastic game for early prototype sketching. Now, what this has above OneNote is this is in vector. It's all these scribbles, it saves in vector, and it is infinitely scrollable and infinitely zoomable. So if I realize, so you can see here, this tiny text here is because I zoomed in and wrote some other stuff because there wasn't room around it and I didn't want to take it out. So you can have a big picture, zoom in, and make little small changes, make notes. You know, if you realize, you know, you draw the simple thing of your board, generally what it looks like, and then you can zoom in and make notes about what should go where. So Made with Mischief, it's a relatively cheap program. I think it's like $20 or something, but definitely well worth it. This is not cheap. This is a big purchase. I use a Microsoft Surface Book mainly because I want to be able to do handwriting for OneNote and for Mischief. You know, some people, you can use an iPad Pro for some of this. I don't know if Mischief is on that, but there might be other programs that do it. But yes, it is beneficial to be able to write stuff. You know, for years I tried just typing stuff, and I'd be fiddling with creating tables with the mouse and all. And a notebook just can't keep it until you have to stretch it across a bunch of pages and refer back, and the notes just get muddled. So I use this to keep things in one place and interact with those drawing programs regularly. And that's about it. I guess that's it. Questions? Yes?
When you're doing a test or a blind test, is it more beneficial to have strangers or a group that's already friends?
It depends where in your process you are. You only get to have a stranger test your, well, first of all, blind test will almost always be strangers. I have the benefit now that I'm published, and there are a few people who like the games I've made that are now willing to do tests for me that I can take advantage. But yeah, blind tests will almost always be strangers. It'll be hard for you to arrange, but early on, rely on your friends, because your game is going to be so awful, you don't want to inflict that on a stranger who doesn't know you. You want to have friends who you know will forgive you, and they've already bought you a Christmas present, so you don't have to worry about that. Yes?
Can I ask you, say, take down everybody's feedback, but what if the playtesters give you, conflicting feedback?
You take it down.
No, but I'm saying, when you then make the decision, what do you choose, just the majority or what you think is best? Because, obviously there's some bias there.
Right, and okay, so here's another thing. Playtesters, always listen to them about bugs, never listen to them about solutions. Playtesters, when they're telling you what's wrong, what they didn't enjoy, their word is gospel, but when they're giving suggestions on what to do about it, don't trust them as far as you can throw them. And in terms of getting conflicting feedback, this will often happen. Someone will say, I like this, the other person says, I hate it. What you do then is you repeat the cycle, you go back to test, and you've just found out what your what is for the next test. What your why is for the next test. Why? Your why for the next test is, do these other people agree with this one or that one? Right? Even conflicting feedback helps you with your next test to know what to focus on. And you don't, even if you just don't make a change, just run another test with different people and see. And I never prompt them. Never tell your playtesters what you're looking for, because that will affect how they proceed with things. The only instance is if there's a specific strategy you want to see someone can exploit. And I've done this. I've done this for people. Just because I'm a very mathematical gamer, I will have game designers tell me when I'm about to test, okay, Michael, try to break this one thing, right? And you just tell that one person, so no one else knows what they're doing, but that one person has a mission to help you with the one thing you're looking for. But otherwise, don't tell them what your why is, but you should know what your why is, and you should have it written down, so that when it comes time for feedback at the end, if no one mentions it, then you can ask, well, what about this? And you won't forget to do it. Yes?
Can we reach out to you in social media or some way? Is there already a copy of the slides or some?
Absolutely. I have some cards here. Just send me an email. Okay. Yeah. Reach out to me. I have no problem. I'll send you out my slides.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Yes.
When you feel like your game is ready to shop it to publishers, how do you know how to do that? Do they usually have on their website?
Right. Well, first thing is to choose the publisher. This is a mistake I made early on. Is I went to I said, okay, I'm going to Origins. I looked at the list of publishers at Origins and I made an appointment with all of them. Don't do that. Hopefully, you've been doing the play part long enough. You've seen what other publishers do. You should know what that publisher publishes. Don't give them a copy of their game, right? But you're not going to submit a heavy financial game to Hasbro. Don't submit it to Hasbro anyway. There's basically no chance of it, and also you need an agent. But for the publisher you do choose, know their catalog. Know that your game has a place within their catalog that isn't already occupied, but it won't seem out of place. Right? I made the mistake of I actually submitted one of my early games to a financial game to Out of the Box because I didn't know better. And they're the people who make apples to apples. So you can imagine how well that went over. Yes? I'm sorry. Just to finish. Once you've selected those publishers, go on their website. They'll have a submissions thing somewhere on there. If they don't, they'll have a contact. Ask them, can I set up a meeting with you at Origins, at Gen Con?
So at what point would you create a more official version of the game with good graphics and because
it's a continuous improvement process,
okay.
Right? You're building it up. I showed you that slide of that board that went from 8 white tiles to colored thing, and there were even steps in between that, and eventually it got to the published version. Some publishers don't even like to finish the product to be submitted to them because they do it. But you want to make sure your components are good enough that they don't get in the way of the player's enjoyment, right? You want, if you're making a card game, you want some art on that card. It doesn't have to be good art, but you need some art on that card because part of what players do in order to identify one of 40 cards on the table is look at the art to know which card is which. So you want enough to make your test go well, but don't spend terribly much.
So are you the one who does the final art?
Absolutely not.
The publisher is the one who takes care of it?
No, the publisher takes care of it. They have people. They'll contract that out. Don't waste your money. It'll cost you thousands of dollars, and the publisher will not reimburse you, and they'll use something different because it's not in their house style anyway. Yes.
So what if you're talking to publishers, you've done your research, but the unthinkable happens, and they happen to name something you would never have heard of in a million years? Is there?
You accept that feedback. You say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know about that. I'll go to take a look. Thank you for telling me." Mm-hmm. You immediately back out. You be gracious. You be thankful, because you want them to remember you're the nice guy, not the person who argued with them, because you're going to come back to them someday. Sir?
When it's time to decide that your design is destined for trash, is it just a matter of feedback, enough people saying it's just not fun, or the mechanics just don't work right?
It's a matter of direction. If you don't know what your direction is, if you don't know what arrow you're going to take on the next test, how you're going to build it up, how you're going to complicate it, how you're going to simplify it, that will make it great, that's when it's time to trash. If you think, okay, some people are complaining about it, but really there's nothing to do, I think, the normal instinct for a game designer, myself included at that point, is say, yeah, there's some not great feedback. People aren't wild about it, but some people have fun, right? And I really can't think of anything to change. The first instinct is to shop it, go to the shop stage and start showing it publishers, when really the instinct should be trash it. You trash it when you don't know when you have no idea how to take it forward towards greatness, and you think it is what it is. That's when you trash it. If you think it's already great, feedback's great, players are engaged, that's when you go to shop.
When is trash, literally trash? When is it, well, I'm done with this, I'm not going to work on it, but I still have that prototype box up
Yeah,
there so that when I refer to some inspirational idea or whatever.
I'll say, okay, trash is more idea of set it aside, leave it out of my mind, I'm going to work on new stuff, right? In terms of physically trashing it, I do that when I move. It's like, I don't want to box this up and take it with me. Then otherwise it sits in a drawer because at the very least I can scavenge it for components for a new design. Anyone? Yes.
Have you attended any small local board game conventions?
Yes. Oh, thank you. I attend regularly the double exposure conventions, which take place in Morristown, New Jersey. They are fantastic people, and I cannot credit them enough with helping me become a published designer, because they will let you they'll let you schedule play tests on their official events. They'll help get round up people for you. They have, in fact, a specific convention called Metatopia, which is specifically for playtesting, and this is magical. I don't know how this happens. Non-designers will show up because they're interested in trying out a bunch of different games, and you don't need to find people to test your game. You'll get brand new testers. So, Morristown's quite a bit away, but I absolutely recommend Metatopia. Metatopia is worth it for any designer who has gotten past the friends have tried my game stage, and I think there's something here, but I need new voices. So look at Metatopia. Another one that's similar to that is Unpub in Baltimore. It's bigger than Metatopia. Has a bigger audience. I enjoy it, a lot of great people there. The only downside to that for me is the types. It's most friendly to people who make short, visually engaging, easy to explain games, because there it's not. It's the general public coming in, not even gamer public, but the general public coming in Baltimore and trying out these games. So having something that'll draw people to your table. With Metatopia, what I like they do there is they assign people to your game. They ask people what kind of games you like, and they will assign them to your session. Unpub, you have to be someone who's good at drawing people in and have a game. If you have a game that's longer than 2 hours, don't bring it to Unpub. It's not going to go well for you. There's those. There's other game designers convention. I know there's one in Connecticut that I can't. Local Festival of Local Indie Games.
Yes,
I think it's called.
CTP.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry.
There's one in Boston also.
Yeah. I mean, there are going to be these things. There are enough the board gaming hobby has grown enough that there are going to be design groups in every city who you'll want to make contact with. And they might have conventions, especially playtesting conventions. Unpub also has local, in addition to their main convention in Baltimore, people will set up local Unpub ones for just 6 designers at their local game store. I would definitely thank you for reminding me. Anyone else? Okay. Just a quick note, if you'd like to try some of my games, at 2 o'clock, I'm going to be running Captains of Industry. And tomorrow, for an exchange, this is one of my prototypes. It is very early and very bad. If you show up for this, you will not have fun. But you might learn something interesting. And hopefully help me learn something interesting. And City Hall, I'm also running tomorrow. But thank you for your time.